Hello, it's Mike here. I thought I would do a video on the PC versus console debate, and it was inspired by Big Dan's video on the same subject. And I just thought I would. I've got a few points here, but I just thought I would talk about things which, in general, annoy people, because the people who actually mention them have an agenda. Now, the first thing is PCs are more powerful than consoles. Well, that is true. PCs generally are more powerful than consoles, but PCs cost considerably more than consoles do. An example, a PC laptop that's capable of playing games at the same resolution quality, because there are so many different factors. You've got things like Z buffering, etc., etc., require a laptop to cost somewhere in the region of £3,000. Now, a desktop version of the same PC might cost you £1,000. Now, the average console, if we look at the PlayStation 4, Xbox One, they're less than half the price. So, obviously, they're going to be less powerful. So, to use the excuse that my PC is more powerful than your console is stupid, because it wants to be for the price that you paid for it. Now, PCs require operating systems. And until recently, with the introduction of the Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, and now the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, which have ridiculous sized operating systems. I read an article which said that Microsoft would allow 5 gigabytes for programmers to create their games. Remember, the machine's got 8 gigabytes. You're trying to tell me that the operating system requires 3 gigabytes of the RAM. So automatically, the console is being gimped because the operating system is stupidly big. Cut that thing down to about 400 or 500 megabytes and you'll be able to do more. So the problem is that PCs have been designed for operating systems because they're not games consoles. They're, the first PC, called the IBM PC, which was made in 1986, was a business machine. And by the turn of the 90s, you got games which were created because I guess people in the workplace wanted something to do in their lunch hour, because it took too long to do anything. You go and buy a sandwich and half the lunch is gone. And so, the biggest played game in the world is still Solitaire, and that Mind, whatever it's called, that comes free with Windows. Well, this leads to compatibility for PCs with older games. You've got to understand that over the last 20 years, PC hardware has changed beyond recognition. An example, if you were to talk to someone in the late 1990s, early 2000s, they would brag about how fast their CPU was. Whereas now, the CPU just makes up a single component in a far more complex system. The RAM affects the way a game plays, the graphics card, the motherboard. It's not simple anymore. So you can have a machine like a laptop, which they say quad core 3.4 gigahertz processor, but the motherboard's running at 666 megahertz instead of, say, a desktop running at 1300 or 1500. It will never compete. Then the trouble with the laptops, in my opinion, is the fact that Intel-based laptops have integrated GPUs, or graphics processing units, which are by far the worst graphics chips ever made. So if you really want to get a laptop you have to accept the fact the hard drive runs slower, the graphics card runs slower, the memory runs slower. And I would actually advise anyone who wants to buy a laptop to either spend the extra money or get yourself one based on AMD, because AMD CPUs have far better graphics processors integrated than Intel. I wouldn't recommend buying a laptop unless you're using it for business, because laptops are seriously underpowered compared to a desktop. And as a result, it means that a lot of older games are less compatible with Intel-based CPUs, because if you go back 10 years ago, no one used Intel processors, graphics cards, because they were crap. They are crap, they were crap. And in the compatibility issue with older games, there are two companies which are at the forefront. One is Nvidia and the other is ATI. So pretty much every game is designed for them. The DirectX allows Intel to provide you with some form of experience, but the fact of the matter is that most games are designed for Nvidia and ATI, which is now AMD, to the point where when you load a game up it says designed for Nvidia or designed for Nvidia and a certain range of cards. I would agree with Daniel that it would help if they actually told you if your machine was compatible, but the problem is that there are just far too many different manufacturers of goods for PCs. I mean, if you look at, say, graphics cards, you've got Nvidia, you've got ATI, you have Intel, you have the integrated chips by AMD. I'm not sure if S3 are still going, because 20 years ago they were one of the biggest companies. Another company you probably never heard of was called 3DFX, and they introduced the first 3D powered graphics card. Eventually they were bought out by Nvidia, and they introduced texture compression into the Nvidia range. But the problem is that because original games were designed for technology that no longer exists, it is far harder to emulate a piece of hardware than it is emulating software. And as the operating systems developed, they got rid of functions which they thought were no longer needed. The problem being is that if you were to keep every function, every graphics card, and try to emulate every component of the past, an operating system would be somewhere in the region of 20 gigabytes rather than, say, 10. So the problem is that you need to understand that PCs are not the same as consoles. When people talk about the NES or the Super Nintendo, these consoles were designed to play games just then. PlayStation was the first console to introduce... No, PlayStation 2 was the first console to introduce backwards compatibility. And the only reason they were able to do that was that they were able to design a way to put a chip hardware onto the console which would enable it to play all the games. And even then there was a handful of games that wouldn't run because they didn't use the PlayStation in the same way. I could explain, but you would just start to get a little confused with all the complex details. Now with the PC, because they have been changing, it means that the hardware we have today have very little resemblance to the hardware 20 years ago. So why are you surprised that they're not compatible? The fact of the matter is that anything as complex as a PC used for everything will never do any job properly. There's a phrase, jack of all trades, master of none. And that is what the PC is. A console's designed to play consoles. Although the latest generation, they're not quite sure what they really want to do. Because they want it to be the video recorder, they want it to enable you to watch films, they want you to use that instead of your cable stroke satellite box. So you may find that in the future, console games will not be as striking as they were in the past. And there will be more and more problems, but this is due to the fact that console games are becoming more complex. So you'll just get used to the fact that there will be more and more patches for games, because the latest generation of consoles are just PCs. I mean, PCs would actually benefit from having just two manufacturers, and then you would have no problems with the compatibility issues. But because there's, like I said, there's so many different parts. Now, let's go to consoles. Consoles do not have compatibility problems, but like I said, we've only had it recently. Before, you would have to have an NES, you would have to have a Super Nintendo, you would have to have a Nintendo 64, you would have to have Sega Genesis, Master System, etc. Now, because they were designed just to play games for one system, nothing before, of course they run fine. You know, I can use the excuse of PCs have emulation, but then so do consoles. You think the Nintendo Wii is running a PC Engine game natively? No. Do you think Xbox 360 is running a game designed for Super Nintendo natively? No. So the thing is that both systems have emulation. Console systems are not as good looking as PC versions of the game. Ask yourself one question: what is the lead system? I mean, proof of the pudding is Wolfenstein: The New Order evidently was designed for the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4, and as a result, the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 versions did not run as well, because the people who made the game didn't have to make it run as well, because they're lazy. Programmers have become lazy since PC gaming has been introduced into the marketplace. They don't have to, for instance, stick within a limitation of a system. If 2 gigabytes of RAM isn't enough, just put another 2 on. If that's not enough, just put another 4 on. And as a result, the programmers have become lazy, and it has reflected in console ports of the same games. Now, when someone talks about PC versus console, I just don't get it. If you prefer playing console games, then why do you care what PC owners use? Why do you care if a game might look better if you magnified it on a 100-inch screen? And if you are a PC gamer, why do you care that people who play console games have versions of the games that are inferior? It makes no sense. It seems to me that the real reason why we have these wars is because these people are just trying to justify their purchases. It's almost as if they have an emotional investment into a piece of hardware, which they have to feel fulfilled by having other people telling them that they haven't wasted their money. I mean, I bought consoles that died a year after they were released. Did I enjoy them? Yes. You know, an example, the arguments between, for instance, the Xbox, PlayStation 2 and Dreamcast. It turns out that the Dreamcast was more powerful than the PlayStation 2. The Xbox and GameCube were more powerful than the PlayStation 2. But without games, what difference does that make? If a console has games that I want to play, I'll buy them. On the PC, there's certain types of games I prefer. First-person shoot 'em ups feel more natural to me with a keyboard and mouse, but does it mean that someone that prefers a gamepad should be trodden on verbally because they dare to play the game in a different way to myself? No. It is what it is. You like what you like, and people always have to find ways to justify their purchase. That's it. That's the console versus PC market in a simple sentence. People who buy PCs have to justify their purchase. People who buy consoles have to justify it. But if you get people like myself, and there's a lot of people like me, we don't care. You know, it doesn't matter if a game is in high definition, low definition. In my case, the only thing that matters, I want to get the best looking picture. So, for instance, if you look at, say, PlayStation 2, you've got the standard composite little yellow plug, and the picture looks very blurry. Then in Europe you have SCART, which improves the quality of the picture, and in America you have Component, which improves the quality dramatically, to the point where if you use a Component connection on the PlayStation 2, you can actually run some games at 1080i. It's not about high resolution, it's about the experience. And if everything looks fuzzy, to me it's not as enjoyable. But as I said, it's about the experience, not the quality. If that was the case, then you will find that older consoles will be unplayable, but yet the games are still playable. So does that matter? So let's go back to the initial thing, PC versus consoles. My response is, who cares? Like what you like. If you don't like it, don't use it. But stop going onto forums and making huge arguments about things that really don't matter. It's a bit like, for instance, take this room here. Arguing about the colour of the paint on the walls rather than whether it's suitable for what I want. Who cares? Or, you have a bigger house than me, and you paid more than me, I don't care. To me, it is arguing about the details while ignoring the obvious. You want to play games? Does it play the games? If you buy a PC and it requires you to put an effort into it, then do your research before you buy the games. Don't assume that everything should run on Windows 7 that was made for Windows 95. They're different operating systems, so different hardware. So if you can't be bothered to do the research, don't buy the hardware. Stick to consoles. People who like PC games, they like it for what it offers, but if they're not prepared to put the work in, then it won't work. Console games don't always work either, which is why you had the problems with PAL versus NTSC, region locking. Every system has their flaws and benefits. Just buy something you like and stick with it. But stop complaining. Stop comparing it to other things. Most people don't even care. They'll argue with you because it's funny. You know, they're called trolls. But if you really want one over the other, just buy it and shut the fuck up.